Welcome, everyone. So Allie is connecting. Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Let's see. So, are we recording?
We are. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So,
Awesome.
as people start joining, I just want to start. My name's Allie. I'm the owner of Elite Medical and Aesthetics here in Lone Tree, Colorado. And I'm here with Marisa Faye, who is a holistic nutritionist. And kind of the reason why we wanted to get these conversations teed up is I've been working with Marisa as my personal nutritionist. And you guys, I have learned so much about nutrition that I cannot believe that like general medicine has not taught us. So with that being said, I'm a double board certified nurse practitioner. I have experience in internal med, critical care. Now I work in aesthetics, and like every time I talk to Marisa, I feel dumb. So that's why we're here, so that Marisa can talk to all of us about today in particular about how gut imbalances can sabotage your skin. So Marisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your credentials, and then we'll kind of go into some my story and then some Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Ellie, I'm so grateful that you are not only willing, but excited to have this conversation because it gets personal. Yeah, but so as Allie mentioned, I'm actually a board certified holistic nutritionist, which I bring that up because it means I've been through a lot of advanced training, like thousands of hours. You know, they say it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert. I think I'm well over that in trainings and certifications and what I've studied. I'm also a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and a restorative wellness practitioner. And that's really relevant because what it means is I'm trained in how to run functional labs and interpret them from a functional medicine lens. And that's really critical to what I do. And I really came into this work because the conventional medicine world really just like failed me on my personal health. And that was super duper frustrating to spend about 10 years working on my own gut and thyroid health. And just like not getting the answers and people not recognizing and acknowledging that like you can reverse your symptoms. Like not everything is easy to reverse or easy to heal, but a lot of things you really can shift and change. And so I think it's really empowering just to like hear that and know that. So that's one thing I hope folks take away when they listen to this of like many of your symptoms are probably reversible. And that's where I practice root cause nutrition and wellness. And that's critical. And that's part of why we're here today, because really there are so many things interconnected that we just don't often think about.
Totally. That was really well said. And, that's the problem with, and again, like I love modern medicine. There's a reason for hospitals and critical care and
Mm-hmm.
emergency rooms is that our job there is to treat the symptoms, whereas what
Mm-hmm.
you do is you treat the underlying cause.
Yeah.
And for those of you joining us, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. And those of you that are clients may have heard this. I've been talking about Marisa like nonstop. Might be TMI, but I think it's good for us to open these conversations and to start talking about these things as normal to talk about, and not that these are normal things happening. Because that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what I was feeling from modern medicine is like, oh, it's normal to have horrible periods, or it's normal to have these other symptoms, and it doesn't have to be normal for us. And so for those of you tuning in, we're going to talk about skin conditions as well. So it doesn't have to be normal to have hormonal acne or eczema and all these things. So to give you a little backstory, I wanted to work with Marisa because despite all of my medical knowledge, 7 years of medical college, 12 years in the field, I could not figure out what was going on with me. I felt tired all the time. I was having achy joints. My back hurt. I was having recurrent infections where I had to be on antibiotics. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I was reading every journal article I could find. I went to my general practitioners who I was on the way to having an autoimmune workup. And I was like, there's something else going on. This came out of nowhere. I am just tired. I need to know what's going on. So I got recommended to Marisa. And the first time I talked to her, she was like, absolutely, I can help you with this. This sounds like it's coming from your gut. We can certainly start working on this. And she has been absolutely right. So like every symptom I've had has gone away. I feel great. I am like everything free right now, including caffeine. And this is how much energy I have. I don't have any hormonal breakouts ever. My skin is clear. You guys can't tell, but my eyelashes are really long too, which is
Yeah.
efficient. And I'll tell you guys about the crazy stuff later because I'm literally on a deworming protocol right now too.
Mhm.
Oh my God, blowing my mind. And so I will talk a little bit more about that later, but I want us all to hear from Marisa a little bit more. So I do have some specific questions for you,
Yeah.
and definitely elaborate on anything and add whatever you would like to it. But the first one is, what are the most common skin conditions that you see that as soon as you hear that, you're like, oh, that's a gut imbalance?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've learned throughout my work, and I don't know if I picked this phrase up somewhere else or I came up with it. I think it's probably a mix, but what's happening with especially your intestines is often reflected on your skin. And that's because the skin, right? The tissue inside of your intestines is actually very similar to our skin. And so when somebody has skin issues, I automatically think about what's happening in your intestines, especially your small intestines. And for those of you who don't know where those are, you draw a circle around your belly button, that's often where small intestines are. And you can actually palpate or touch yourself there and see if it's a little bit tender. That's a little trick. Make sure you do it clockwise so that we're going with the bowels. But that's something you can do to just tune in and see, is there a little tenderness there in your small intestines? But especially skin issues like that have to do with redness, things like rosacea, things like that have to do with dryness, like psoriasis, different types of issues that we might be looking at there. Rosacea, really thinking about imbalances in bacteria, in parasites, things like that. Something that is more like severe dryness, we're thinking about what's stealing the minerals, basically, what's stealing the nutrients, or does somebody have enough nutrients in their diet, right? So things like that. And then, of course, you all are probably thinking like hormonal acne for sure, right? From Chinese medicine and traditional medicine, we actually have face mapping, which is really cool. I don't overly buy into things like that, but I think they're really interesting. And we know hormonal acne, if we think about face mapping, is often going to be along kind of the chin line. We also see a little bit of it kind of in that T-zone. But anytime someone is having like a hormone issue, there's often always a gut issue because those are so intimately connected. So we really have to think about what's going on in the guts. And really, when I say gut, I'm thinking the whole digestive tract, which is all the way from your mouth down through your beehole. So really the whole thing, right? So those are really common. But the other thing I want to call y'all's attention to is actually hair. And Allie, I'm so glad you pointed out your eyelashes growing in. And just being kind of like long and luscious, but actually the hair that's supposed to grow on our face or not supposed to grow on our face, that is such an indication of what's happening on the inside and what's happening in your gut. And again, thinking about what's stealing the nutrients. And in some folks' case, it is things like worms and parasites that are stealing the nutrients. It's also just in general, something inhibiting your body's ability to absorb nourishment, right? So if you can't absorb nourishment through your gut, nothing else on your body is going to get the optimum amount of nourishment that it wants and needs. Yeah. And Veronica, one of my other clients, said, yeah, the worm protocol is quite an experience. It is. Yeah.
It is, and I feel like this is a good time to talk about that because again, like I said, I'm a highly trained medical professional and like we weren't taught this stuff. Like I was taught that people that have worms are from third world countries. And so this is a good time to share, yes, the Veronica, the worming protocol. Oh my gosh. So when I start working with Marisa, she goes, don't be surprised if you see anything funny in the toilet. And I'm going like, what? Like, what are you talking about, Marisa? And she's like, liver flukes, worms. And I'm thinking, oh, well, she's not talking about me because my stool test was negative for worm. And I don't go anywhere except for, like Denver, Colorado, which is 30 minutes from me here in Lone Tree. And so I'm like, no, she's not talking about me. But obviously I start paying attention now because I'm like, well, she told me to look in the toilet. And so 2 months into the protocol, I see a flipping worm and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so I get on the phone with Marisa and she's just like, yeah, didn't really want to overwhelm you, but that's normal.
Yeah.
The community, the saying that was really shocking to me that you had quoted was, if you have a pulse, you have parasites. And so a lot of my friends, also in medicine, they're like, you don't have worms. And I'm like, no, you guys, literally I've seen them with my own eyes. And I think that's the most fascinating part of all this is that all of us are probably running around with worms and we have no idea. And some people, they're probably causing issues like myself, and other people they're not. But even for me, I wasn't really having GI symptoms. I was having afterwards I noticed how dry my skin was, that my hair wasn't growing in, my eyelashes were different, but only now because it's, I have all these fuzzy hairs everywhere. Noticed it, but mine was mostly just the tiredness, achy joints, feeling crummy. And so tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that's what's going to be intriguing to people is that we probably all have parasites causing problems.
Yeah, totally. And I also think that's why you and I really connect about the skin health issue because of what you do in the realm of skin health, but also because it's another one of those parts of the body where people don't necessarily connect that to what's happening in their gut, and especially aren't thinking like, oh, I probably have worms or parasites that are causing this issue, right? So yeah, one of my favorite quotes is that, if you have a pulse, you probably have a parasite. And this is the thing is, yes, we are so fortunate. If you're joining us today or watching this later, like you have a smartphone, I know you're probably at least well enough off to have internet and things like that. And yeah, we are so fortunate to live with access to sanitation and things like that. However, parasites have been around since before humans have, well before. And their job is to hide, right? Like their whole survival happens only if they can hide and we live, basically. So it's not to say that, they're always causing issues. And it's not to say that we want to sterilize your internal environment. We don't actually. I use the bouncer theory, which is we really want to improve and increase healthy bouncers that your body has, so that when people get too rowdy at the party, right? When parasites get too rowdy at the party, they could kick them out, right? And so it's really about the balance and them helping so that the really kind of more pathogenic ones, the ones that have more severe symptoms associated, aren't really growing, festering, and attaching. And so that's really critical. But the other thing to think about with things like parasites, like worms and protozoa, and we talked about liver flukes a little bit, we can touch on that a little bit more, but they tend to look like little kind of white rice grains. And you might already pass some of those on occasion. If you eat some food with a lot of ginger or garlic, that might happen. But all of these things have protective barriers and mechanisms in place so that they don't get pushed out of your body unless they want to, which they don't. And so as a part of that, these protective barriers and mechanisms actually are kind of like super glue or like sticky paper for other toxins. So things like heavy metals, things like xenoestrogens. So those are going to be in plastics, hormones given to animals we eat, things like that in our food system, things in your skincare or makeup products. So they're like sticky tack for things like that, in addition to things like yeast, which is something that has gotten a little bit of attention, I feel like, for folks who have skin stuff. So they can glob on, these parasites can glob onto other toxins and just hold those in your system so your body can't detox and can't move those out. And that also can be the cause of the issue that folks are dealing with. So it's not always that the actual, for example, in this example, like worm is causing the terrible symptoms or issues you may be having. It may actually be the worm's kind of defensive mechanism, or in the case of bacteria, we think of things like their biofilm, which is really, I think of as this protective spider web almost material that they put around themselves, and it's what's being held onto in there. And this is also why I don't recommend that folks really go about removing parasites or removing really unfriendly bacteria by themselves, because when you do that, you're also dislodging everything that these critters have been gathering. And most of our systems, unless we're really good about making sure our body is able to handle toxins, most of our systems can't handle that out of the bat, like right out the gate. So that's why it's really important to work with someone who can take you through a process and use specific strategies and lead you step by step, because it can actually be dangerous to do by yourself. I know a good number of folks who have landed in the hospital actually because they took a mega dose of something that somebody pushed on social media, and they wound up with really severe symptoms, things going on with liver or gallbladder, or just feeling there was one client who came to me, and before she came to me, she did a mega dose of something, and I can't remember the word. You probably know it, Allie, but all of her joints were like this, right? Like she kind of got.
Oh, it wasn't rhabdo, was it? Like rhabdomyolysis with her muscle?
I don't know if it was that, but she was kind of like almost like frozen a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you just have to be so careful.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. And, I am glad you brought that up because, with me having a lot of friends in the medical community, when I tell them about worms, they're like, oh my gosh, well, I'm just going to have so-and-so write me a prescription. I'm like, don't do that.
No.
And with that being said, too, I have other friends that have traveled and they're like, oh, I had worms once, but I took a prescription for a week and they're all gone. And so when I had asked you about that, because I'm on my 3rd month now of the deworming protocol, and you guys, I'm like literally still seeing worms. Up until 5 days, I haven't seen any since
then. Good.
More about tomorrow, but
yeah.
But I've been seeing them consistently for like 3 months now. And so tell us a little bit about that, and like, how do these more gentle protocols compare to like, taking a prescription once and then taking another one a week later.
Yeah. So in the case of, prescriptions, when we look at, and I think it's also important to mention certain bacteria that might be overgrown as well. One that's really common that providers will write a prescription for are things like H. pylori or SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I actually get a lot of clients who a doctor has written them a prescription and it didn't work, or it caused more issues actually. So you may wipe out that one thing, but that one thing might actually be protecting you from something else. It might be the bouncer for that other bacteria or that other parasite. And so all of a sudden you've created an opportunity for that to come through and really get strong and cause even more symptoms. Mm-hmm. So this is where, sometimes I will say there's a small section of my practice where there are times where I will say, let's work with a provider who can write a prescription, or let's talk to someone about that, right? Because it can be helpful in some cases, but I would say overwhelmingly, there's a difference in my philosophy versus, Western medicine or allopathic conventional medicine, which is, the germ theory versus the terrain theory, right? And so Western medicine really believes in the germ theory. So they believe, let's go after the germ, right? And sometimes we do need to do that, but I would say much less so than they practice it, because they're experts in emergency medicine, right? Like to your point, Allie, like if I get in a car accident, for sure I want to be at an ER in the United States to be taken care of, right? But if I'm dealing with something that's more chronic, that's preventative health, absolutely not. Keep me away from there because of this very reason. So terrain theory is, if we actually improve the health of your terrain, so of your organs, of your systems, if we actually optimize how they function, then we create a system in which can handle itself, right? It can be its own bouncer, right? We don't need a medication to be the bouncer. It can actually take care of making sure things stay balanced and in check. Now, that goes along with having to maintain healthy habits and having to tune into your body and having to really prioritize your health and well-being. But I don't think it actually has to be quite so difficult or challenging. The other thing I see with prescription medications, and again, not a doctor, not giving anybody personal medical advice, but sometimes the additional ingredients that are in some of those prescriptions cause issues for folks because they do have chemicals in them that are just not great for your body, that if you're not already able to move these toxins out, you're just further backing up your toxic load, and that can create a lot of issues. I see that with a lot of folks with hormone stuff who have tried some of these prescriptions and they've not worked. And then the other part of that too is just this philosophy of thinking that like these things are evil. And it's like, yeah, I know they're causing you discomfort. And I know it's not fun to see like 3 months of these critters coming out, right? But like they're there for a reason. And in many cases, they're trying to protect you from something else. And so I just think there's a way for us to really honor how your body functions and honor how to optimize, right, the terrain, how to create a healthier inside, that you just can't short circuit. You just can't like go around that with a prescription medication. I've never heard nor seen of one kind of clinically in the research or in practice that's like, actually that one, yeah, like that circumvents everything. Let's do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the tough thing is like with me being a Western trained medical professional, if they could do things where they would combine this holistic approach and Eastern medicine together, it'd be so helpful, because what we spend half of our time doing in Western medicine is just treating symptoms, right? So if you go to the dermatologist because you're having horrible acne, you're going to end up on spironolactone to control your hormones when really there's probably an underlying issue causing it in the first place. You're going to end up on oral and topical antibiotics, which also you could just be treating a symptom. And so it's really hard when people, for instance, come into my office and they want to talk about skincare. And sometimes I'm like, this does sound like X, Y, or Z. We could treat that with a light therapy or something else. But at the end of the day, I'm like, we're just treating your symptoms. You need to get to the underlying cause. And all these medications may be really putting things out of balance. So I'm glad that you explained that I really like the terrain theory. And interestingly enough, after 14 years in modern medicine, this is the first time I'm learning about it.
Wow.
And, yeah, which is absolutely, and I'm a very healthy person. Like I was, even as an aesthetic injector, the only toxin I put in my body is Botox. And so, because I don't drink, I don't smoke, I eat really, or I thought I ate really healthy until I met Marisa. Um, and I'm just learning about this terrain theory. And so it's been really, really fascinating on how all of this affects our skin. And so
Yeah,
going back to skin, because I could talk about worms all day long, because I find
I
it so fascinating
know.
now. But something that's been really intriguing to me on your posts lately, and I could not wait to ask you about it today, was the theories of mitochondrial damage and then also how humans respond to sun. Because I basically bathe in sunscreen. And when I was a
Hmm.
kid, I was thinking, I was like, I didn't used to have to do that. And so I'm excited to hear about evolutionarily how we respond to the sun and then what's going on with why we're so sensitive to it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just touch on one thing you said before, because I think it's so important when we talk about, especially medications that are often prescribed for acne. I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
hormonal birth control prescribed for that, let alone like spironolactone. And I'm blanking on the other one that's really intense that gets prescribed for acne. But, these all disrupt your gut microbiome and they do have long lasting effects. And we do see those. You can actually look up, I'm a big fan of empowering all of you to look up your own information. You can go on PubMed and look up the studies. And that's going to be a non-biased third party as opposed to using a search engine like Google. It's going to be higher quality research you're going to find. But we see damage in people's gut microbiome. And then as a consequence, their hormones, truly, it can be for years. And so, right, anything that's going to, in a way, try to sterilize your skin will first sterilize your gut or try to do that. And that, again, thinking about this terrain theory, which again, encourage everybody to go down the rabbit hole on that because it's really important that you understand how you can keep yourself healthy now and in the future. And that is a big part of it. So that's it. Answering the other question. So, I mean, I was a sunscreener too from way back. So I partially grew up in Southern Arizona. And I remember even in college, I was always on my friends who also had fair skin like I did of like, come here with my spray sunscreen, right? Like, come here before we go out to the pool. Like, let me spray you down. I was terrified of burning. And I was really trained, that you burn your skin, you get skin cancer, you die bad. You know what I mean? Like it just, this is how it is. But actually what we see is when we look at trends of who has the most skin cancer, you're not going to believe the country that has the highest incidence of skin cancer. I don't know if you know this, Allie.
I don't.
It's Sweden.
What?
Yes. So
Really?
Sweden, yeah, so Sweden, way up north, right? Like way north. Could it possibly get as much sun as we get even in the United States, I think they're above where we are, right? They're along Canada and maybe further north. Like Sweden has the highest incidence of skin cancer. How is that happening, right? So if we dive in a little bit deeper and we look at some of the data, and if we also try to peel apart and not just look at data and research studies on just skin cancer, but if we think a little bit more about what's happening at the cellular level, I'm really into this idea of like, what is happening in our cells? Because if you have healthy cells, you don't have cancer, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you just don't, theoretically, right? And so if we think about what's happening, I think a big part of it has to do with the balance of fats in our diet. In addition to, of course, like our toxic load and our exposure to toxins and things like that. But I really think focusing on fats, we've been fed a lot of lies. And I spend a good amount of time talking with folks about this because people are really afraid of eating more fats in their diet or eating saturated fats in their diet. And those are usually going to be fats that come from animals or fruits, actually, like coconut, avocado, things like that. But what we actually see is that polyunsaturated fatty acids, which we get from things like vegetables, like nuts, and I'm talking vegetable oils, not fresh vegetables, folks. The flour oil, safflower, sunflower oils, all of those, they actually increase our cellular damage. And then if we go out in the sun, it's like microwaving those. So it's like just further amplifying the damage that's happening at a cellular level. And part of that reason has to do with how those fats oxidize so quickly. So they're not stable, right? Part of, if you want to get really nerdy, and Allie, I know you know this, but anybody watching, so if you want to get really nerdy and look at actually at a cellular level, what's happening with saturated versus unsaturated or partially saturated fatty acids. So we have monounsaturated, we have polyunsaturated, right? We have all these different labels, but it actually has to do with the stability of that fatty acid molecule. And the only fatty acid molecules that are actually stable are saturated fats. And so those saturated fats also coming from animals or high heat kind of climates, they're able to handle, first of all, the heat of our internal body, right? So y'all are probably running somewhere between 97 and 99 degrees on a daily basis. And then if you go work out or you go outside or something like that, your body heat might come up a little bit. We want to be eating things that can actually handle safely that kind of heat, right? Both inside and outside when you're in the sun. And in fact, what we see is that the sun can really be a protective mechanism when it comes to our immune health, when it comes to our gut health, and when it comes to our skin health, fascinatingly enough. But what's so wild is that, after a lifetime or even just 20 years of eating a healthy diet, what kind of we think of as healthy, and Allie, I identify with you of like, I was in public health prior to what I do now, and I thought I ate a healthy diet too. And I was eating, lots of nuts, lots of chicken, lots of veggies, lots of fruit, and avocados, and, all these things. I thought I was being really healthy. And I have to tell you that I've come to realize that I was eating the entirely wrong fats for my body in order to do well in the sun. But you get such a backlog and your body gets so accustomed to how you're eating, how it functions, and the nutrients it's getting, that if you want to shift that balance, it actually takes years. So it takes years to shift how your body is using, absorbs, and then detoxes of the fatty acids that you have eaten. So that is just so critical. But that's why you've seen me come on and talk a lot about like get at least 15 minutes of sun exposure. I mean, it's one of the very best things that you can do to regulate your nervous system, to regulate your sleep-wake cycle. The sun is truly magical. And there, of course, are safe ways to enjoy it, especially for those of us that like have not typically been outside without sunscreen on. Your skin's probably pretty vulnerable. So you want to be really smart about how you expose your body to the sun.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad you said that it takes years to shift that, because I'm like, man, I'm doing this protocol with Marisa for like 6 months and I still am what is happening? But I give it a few more years.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, like, same for me. And what I will say too is like, you don't want to burn, right? Burning is bad. Like that's across the board true. But, when we look at also different nutrient balance, that also points to signs of how your body can tolerate the sun. One of my favorite tricks is making sure that your vitamin D level is balanced, which, by the way, everyone, vitamin D for most of us should never be taken without vitamin K, because otherwise you're going to flood your blood with calcium, and then that's going to recalcify glands, and we don't want it to do that. So that's not a recommendation for everyone, just something to look into. And then the other thing is, one of my favorite tricks is chlorella or chlorophyll, which is plant compound, right? What do plants do with the sun? They photosynthesize. So one of my favorite tricks for folks as they're acclimating to the sun a little bit, and this is also so good for your skin, is to actually put a little bit of that into your water before you go out into the sun.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love it. And tell us a little bit more, because we've been talking a lot about food and how, we both, even being medical people, thought we were eating healthy diets. You've taught me a lot of things that surprise me, and I know a lot of it is individualized. That's why we do the, all the food tests for sensitivities and figure out what's going on for each person individualized. But in general, like, what are your top foods that if anybody listening to this, if they're having skin issues and you were like, hey, if you can't get into one of my programs right now, cut out these, like, what
Totally. Well, first of all, I want to give a plug for my group program that right now applications are open. So marisafaye.com/program. So y'all can visit there. You can apply to get into the program. I'm currently reviewing applications this week. So definitely make sure you head over there and check those out. And that program is going to teach people to go through the process I've taken you through, Allie, but in a group setting, and then to learn how to customize things for themselves, which is so critical just for folks to learn those skills so that they can take it into their future. But what I would say is, like you hit the nail on the head, every body is different, and what's great for everybody is going to be a little bit different. But some of the keys that I think a lot of us can really benefit from, are, first of all, you've got to be including animal meats. There just really isn't any healthy diet out there. And trust me, they've tried to find it in which people aren't eating something from an animal. And I've spent a good deal studying that, trust me, because I was a vegetarian for like 7 years. And gosh, I wish it were possible because I love animals. But it's just not. So making sure that you're including animal products, and that can be as simple as like free range eggs. Like, what a fabulous, nourishing food. But I will tell you, some folks really have an issue with eggs. If you have an issue digesting eggs, you've probably got things going on in your gut. You should definitely sign up for the group program because you need help. And I've been there. I had to avoid eggs for about 8-10 years. So I know what that's like. But making sure that you're including high quality animal meats, whatever that means for you, whatever sounds good for you, is really critical. The other thing is, I think there's really good data out there when it comes to skin health and gut health to remove gluten from your diet. And this really has to do with a lot more than actually like, oh, what we hear in the mainstream media about gluten being bad. And I think it's important to mention that because I'm not saying this because it's a fad. I really buck against fad trends. The reason removing gluten is really critical is, first of all, there is a pesticide or desiccant, so it dries the crop faster, so farmers can bring it to market faster, that they use on those products called glyphosate. It's what's the primary ingredient in Roundup. And it is a known carcinogen. It is a known toxin. It is a known xenoestrogen hormone disruptor. It is not good for you in any way, shape, or form. And the studies on glyphosate and how it impacts your body and your health are terrifying, to be really open and honest about. So I think reducing your exposure to that is really critical to healing anything really that you want to heal. The other thing is that gluten triggers your body to release something called zonulin, and zonulin relaxes the junctions in your intestines. So your intestines have junctions, but I think of it as kind of like a zipper. And we want the junctions to be zippered really tightly. And what happens over time when things are irritating it, when you have a toxin overload, when you have things that are relaxing the junctions, like that zonulin triggered by gluten, you start to get holes in the zipper, and then things can get through. And the problem is that your body recognizes when things come outside of your intestinal lining as it doesn't belong there. Like, why are there things outside of there, right? And so then it mounts an immune response. And that, for a lot of us, especially those of us who identify as women, who have suspected hormone stuff going on, maybe slightly irregular periods, maybe thyroid stuff, or issues handling stress, like that is going to be just something that can really shift things for you. So I think removing gluten is a really big one, an important one for a lot of us. And then I would say when it comes to dairy, prioritizing really high quality dairy, right? Because conventional dairy is going to be another source for you to really get hormone exposure and exposure to whatever that animal ate. And if the animal is eating a lot of corn and soy, that's going to be that fatty acid balance that actually makes your skin more vulnerable to the sun, that also makes your cells more vulnerable, right? So we want to make sure that we're removing that. And then I've tried every diet, truly. I'm such a self-guinea pig because I'm an experiential learner, so I can read about everything, but until I try it on myself, sometimes things don't click. So literally, I did a carnivore experiment 2 years ago. Like, I've tried keto, I've tried vegan, name a diet, I've tried it, right? And what I will say is that overwhelmingly, I do think the benefits from eating fresh fruits and vegetables outweigh by a landslide any drawbacks for most of us. There are some people for which like something more severe is going on and maybe an adjustment, but I would say if you can't tolerate fruits and vegetables, this is your sign to work with someone like me, because you should be able to, and they're just so critical for your health and well-being now and in the future. One of the things about fresh fruits and vegetables is they feed the good bacteria. They also can feed the bad bacteria if that's growing a little too strong. So that's where we sometimes have issues. But then we also have all kinds of phytonutrients and minerals that we get through fruits and vegetables. So I really am out there. I feel like fruits have been so demonized. And I am just out there to tell you, like, fruits are fantastic. Eat fruit, right? But just balance it, right? It's all about balancing it with a good amount of protein and some of the fats that are going to be helpful for your body.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you mentioned that about, feeding good bacteria. And we've talked a lot about, gut health and bacterial balance. And one thing that we talked about, and that I know you've posted about as well, is probiotics. And I have a lot of people
Hmm.
say, oh, well, I know that, skin conditions can be really related to gut health. So I've started taking all these probiotics. Like, you don't want to do that.
No. Yeah.
Probably give a better explanation on maybe why people shouldn't just be taking probiotics in order to heal their own gut health.
Yeah. So there are hundreds of strains of probiotics or hundreds of strains of bacteria that we have identified. I'm sure there are millions, right? Because just infinite possibilities there. But what often happens, especially when folks are buying their probiotics at the grocery store, they're buying the same particular strains of probiotics every single time. And so what you're actually doing is just building up more of the one particular strain in that over-the-counter probiotic, which is just further creating an imbalance, right? So like we talked about at the beginning, and for those of you just joining, talking about the terrain theory, which is the idea we want to create a healthy terrain, a healthy balance. And my theory, the bouncer theory, we want bouncers to keep the party going, but to keep it healthy and to tell things to leave when there's too much of them and tell things to stay when there's not enough of them. And so what you're doing is you're creating a lot of ruckus at that party is really what ends up happening. And it's pulling things for a lot of people further out of balance. Also, you may not need the particular strains that are in that probiotic. Probiotics can really be fantastic. But the other thing too is, I think of probiotics in two categories, although there are technically five categories. But when we look at the kind that we can often find in supplement stores or at the grocery store, I think of there are varieties that plant seeds for probiotic strains to grow and help create that healthy terrain environment. And then there are kinds that like spray the garden. So that means when you take it, they're in your system, but you're going to poop them out and they're not going to kind of stay and hold that space. And a lot of the ones in the grocery store are that kind. They're the kind where they're only in your system as long as you're taking them. Mm-hmm. But what happens over time is when you are mega dosing them, it takes your system a long time to clear them. And the imbalance they've created can cause more issues before your body has a chance to kind of move through that. And so that's where just kind of broad spectrum taking a probiotic, I have plenty of clients who have created more imbalances in their gut because they've megadosed probiotics. And so really, yeah, right. And so really that's where my guidance, rather than swallow something over the counter, if you're not working with someone, get probiotics in your food. Get probiotics from fermented veggies are fantastic. Sauerkraut, pickles, really whatever you like fermented. The big key here is that it's refrigerated and it's not something that you find, on a dry goods shelf, or you can make it at home, or yogurts, right? So I really love Kulina, and the other brand is escaping me, but they're coconut-based fermented yogurts. In our house, we actually do a lot of goat milk kefir. Goat milk for a lot of folks is a little bit easier to digest. It's also typically easier to find higher quality goat milk, at least where we live. So that's something that we tend to rotate in. But I just recommend folks get your probiotic from food sources first and foremost. And then if you want to take it to the next level, get a recommendation from someone who can learn a little bit more about you so that you're not creating more of an imbalance there.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give a really quick summary of everything we've talked about, and then I want to add if I missed anything. And so for anybody just joining, we've been interviewing Marisa about how gut imbalances can sabotage your skin. And it seems like the biggest moral of the story is we're talking mostly about terrain theory. And so if you have a healthy terrain, meaning if you have a healthy gut and you have healthy balance in your system, you're less likely to have skin issues such as we mentioned acne, psoriasis, eczema, things like that. And we talked about, some of the major things that you can do are cutting out gluten, having healthy animal products in your diet, making sure that if you have dairy, that it's a really high quality source. Don't take over the counter probiotics if you can help it. Get that from your food. And ideally, if you can, work with somebody like Marisa. She has a great program that she mentioned, and I'll have you mention that again, Marisa, on how people can work with you and how they can follow your page. And then is there anything else that you want to add that you think is just really important for people to know about how gut health can affect their skin?
Yeah, totally. So we've kind of talked around it. And first I want to say, if you want to check out the program and apply, like I said, I'm looking at applications this week. It's at marisafaye.com/program. And I'll comment too, so you all can see that in the comments. But we've been talking around detox pathways, and detox pathways are I think of the game, you know, the game like who you want to have sex with, who you want to marry, and who you want to kill. It's
Yeah.
like I want to have sex all day with detox pathways, all day. Okay. And you should too, because most of us, our detox pathways are not open. And I'm not talking about like, here's a skinny tummy tea that's going to make you poop your brains out, right? I'm talking about actually the systems that are already in place in your body, but that for most of us aren't working in the way that they need to because of our modern life, because of the way we eat, because of how we live. And I'm not like blaming anyone. I know we're all doing what we think we need to do to be healthy. And it's just so unfortunate that so many of us are missing the mark. So detox pathways, you have 4 of them, okay? One is poop, right? So you need to be pooping every single day. If you are not, like I wasn't years ago, it's a problem. That's how bacteria and parasites really build up and cause all of these skin issues and lead to all of these skin symptoms that are really uncomfortable. So that's really critical. The other one is to make sure that you're urinating enough. You know, there's a lot of discussion about like what color your urine should be. And more than that, like I just think you should be urinating every couple of hours. Like you should wake up in the morning with a full bladder, right? Like that's kind of how it goes. So usually we say start with about half your body weight in ounces of water as a place to start, and make sure that your water is really properly filtered. If you don't know what that means, reach out to me and I can share some of my favorite filters, because what comes out of our faucet just is not sufficient for your body and is going to lead to more of those imbalances, again, that are going to fuel some of these skin issues that we've talked about. Another pathway is your exhales, right? So this is just a good opportunity to like ask yourself right now in this moment, have you exhaled today? Like really exhaled? Because I know I go through days even where like, this is something I practice what I preach. And some days I'm just like, have I like really taken a deep exhale, right? So that's really critical. And then finally, sweat. And this is what I hear so much about with my folks with skin stuff is like, y'all are not sweating and you're proud of it, right? I remember when it was like embarrassing, you know, in like middle school to like have the, you know, the sweaty armpit mark. But now I'm like, hey, I'm sweating. Like I am doing all right in this world. You should be sweating. If you're not sweating, that's another indication things are really gunked up and we need to be moving things out of those pathways. And so because I know that is like so much information, I've actually created a free thing for you all to download if you're watching either live or later. You can go to bit.ly/detox411. So the number's 411, bit.ly/detox, DETOX 411, and you can grab a free detox tracker. This is how you're going to know like how much is my body's inability to detoxify impacting things. And I will tell you, everyone who has downloaded that and circled back with me to say like how it went has said, holy crap, I had no idea that this was such a huge issue for me. Like, what is next? And I've got the answer. So just go through, download that detox tracker at bit.ly/detox411. I swear it will be eye-opening for you. It is for every single person who downloads it. And it is critical for your skin health. And just a plug for Allie, like I really love what Allie does because she seeks to do complementary things for your skin. It will make her job so much easier if you do this work, if you make sure your detox pathways are open, if you balance your gut, because then you get to go see her for like all the fun little tweaks and just to make yourself look even brighter, more youthful, but not trying to cover up something, right? And not trying to solve something that's a chronic issue. So really, like what we do is just so complementary if you care about your skin health to really get yourself on the very best path to a life of good skin.
Absolutely. And I love that because detox pathways, and you're right, I think people want to brag like, oh, I don't sweat, or they think they're in really good shape because they're not sweating. But really, yeah, you're not releasing all those toxins. But with that being said, is there an extreme where when people are overly sweating or they're sweating all the time, is that giving another indication of hormone health or something also is imbalanced there?
Totally. Yeah. Like, so there's an extreme, right? So with bowel movements, I really encourage folks, like, we don't want really more than 3-ish a day. Something's going on, right? If your bowels are that activated. And the same would be true of sweat, but I would also have a lot of questions for you of like, well, are you living somewhere hot? I'd probably have that person track their body temp. So I'm really into like going down the rabbit hole with people who need it on hormone health. And gut is the first place we need to start, because your gut is impacting how your hormones function and impacting how they synthesize and impacting if they get held in the body too long and recycled. But if you really go down the rabbit hole, I actually have folks track their body temperature, because we can actually learn so much by your body temperature and actually your resting pulse to see, you know, are you truly maybe overly activated, sweating too much because your system, the thermostat is just naturally set too high. It can also be a sign someone is fighting off an active virus. So especially if you've had exposure to things like when you were younger, I'm thinking about like the mono virus, right? It can be reactivated later in life. So we see that sometimes with things shifting. So yes, like all of these things are just clues, right, as to what levers need to be pulled. But I'll tell you, I sound like a broken record, and I wish I could tell you that like the gut is not like, no, that's something that we wouldn't want to take care of your gut with. There's not a one. Like I have challenged people, like especially people in kind of our profession, one of our professions, Allie, like even Western or Eastern or alternative or holistic health. I'm like, name something and let me tell you how it relates to the gut, right? Like it's just it's a weird party game that nerds play. But yeah, everything is going to come back to like, how is your gut functioning? And is that optimal before you can move on to the next step?
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you mentioned that it's like what we do is complementary, because I've told people no in my office probably as many times as I've told them yes for treatments, because, you know, I'm like, if you have all this other stuff going on, like one, I don't feel right treating you. Like this should all be icing on the cake. You know, if you're feeling good and your gut health is good and you feel like you're as healthy as you can be, and then you want to come into my office and have laser treatments or injectables or whatever to complement that, that's the ideal situation. Because at the like, I also don't feel right treating people when I'm like, well, I know your hormones are probably affecting your acne, and I could do treatments on you once a week, but I feel like you should probably talk to a nutritionist first, you know? So it's definitely a balance. And so
Yeah, absolutely. And like, people should want to work with someone who says like, sometimes I tell people no, because that means like, not only are you ethical, but like there are standards. And frankly, I think people who don't know a lot are usually the ones who say yes to everyone. And so I think it's one of those secret ways to like really know if somebody knows their stuff is like, do they say no to people?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else to add? And then otherwise, the few people that are on live, if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in while we're both here.
I think the biggest thing is just like, if this sparked something for you, like, don't sit on that, right? Like take action. Like I said, I have that freebie available to you all about your detox pathways, but I am always serving my email list free things that they can use right away. And really the big piece here is that it's all about you learning your body so that you can support your body now and later, right? This is all about like long-term health. And like Allie mentioned, like she's 3 months into, by the way, her custom worming parasite protocol, and there's still things happening. And so we're being responsive to her body, and that's really critical. There is no quick fix when it comes to hormone issues, when it comes to gut issues, when it comes to skin issues. It really is about, are you ready to commit to prioritizing yourself? And are you actually ready to feel better? Because a lot of us have energy around like actually feeling good. It's a bizarre thing. But what I notice, and I have this a little bit, I notice it in my clients, like we have this energy about like I have to change how I think of myself if I feel great. I have to change how I move through the world if I'm prioritizing myself. And it's like, yes, you do, but also like you deserve that, right? Like you do. You deserve to feel good in your skin. You deserve to reverse whatever symptoms are nagging and bothering you. And like, you're not crazy, because I think a lot of times people are told like, just take this pill, just do this one thing. And it's like, no, it takes more than that, but it's really worth it.
Well, and I think you nailed it, you know, and especially with wanting to feel good. And I honestly think that's part of American culture too, right? Of where like, what would women talk about, or those that identify as women, we get together if we don't have something to complain about? And so
I know
this shift of self-care and of all of us, or a lot of us, trying to do what we can to feel our best, because like, how great would it be if every time we talk to Marisa, we're like, well, I just feel wonderful. How do you feel? You know?
Right. Yeah.
That would be ideal. And then also, you know, just like it is hard. And I will tell everybody, so I've been on this track for about 6 months, and I'm a pretty dedicated person in the sense of if I commit to doing something, I can do it. And there have been times where I'm just like, Marissa, I am like depressed. Like I want to eat this and I want to do that, but like I want to stick with this. But I can tell you it's completely worth it. So every phase that we've gone through, I've felt better. Yes, I'm 3 months into deworming. I have literally passed a 2.5 foot worm, which is absolutely insane. Again, and my parasite test was negative, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gone through all these ups and downs, and I have never felt this good in my adult life. So I promise you,
Aw.
this, like, that's why I wanted Marissa to be here. I tell like every client that they're like, I'm feeling this, and I'm like, here's Marisa Faye. You're gonna want to talk to her.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm so grateful to you, Allie, that you are so open about everything you've been through, because I think like normalizing this stuff of like that this is what it takes, and also that like you're going to see things in the toilet, I think is just like this is a part of it. If you really want to heal and reverse your symptoms, you got to brace yourself for this stuff. And I also want to give a shout out to another one of my clients who was on here, who shared that my approach is really custom, that she and her husband are doing very different protocols from me based on their body. And that's true. And that's actually what I'm teaching folks in the group program. It's really an amazing opportunity to get so much of the one-to-one support with me, but at a much more cost-effective price point. And also, I just want to give a shout out that I am offering lab testing as a part of that group program. So Allie can maybe speak to this a little bit too. We did do some functional gut testing and stool testing. And while worms don't typically show up on that, we do see things like the bacterial balance that folks have. And there are other critters that we can learn about that do help us to figure out the path forward. So if anyone's interested, not only in the group program, but doing the testing, you have to apply this week so that we can get that ball rolling. So check out marisafay.com/program. Because you don't want to miss out on this. Truly, like I like want to give this all away. You know, like that is how life changing it is, and how much I want other people to feel good and to have these tools. And this is the path forward.
yes, and I'm glad you brought up the labs again, because like for anybody tuning in or anybody that doesn't know me, I'd mentioned a couple times in here, my background is hospital and critical care medicine. And so I'm very OCD about research, and I need explanations for things. And one thing I really liked about working with Marissa is that we had actual labs. So she not only took all of the labs I had done through my primary care practitioners and I submitted those, but then we also did a blood test and a stool test that she had ordered. And it was so nice to have that data that was individualized for me. So here are my bacteria imbalances. Here's everything else going on. And then once we started optimizing my gut to start healing itself, that's when I started seeing things like worms and other weird stuff, because I think you had explained that my body was primed to get rid of what it no longer needed, if you want to get.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole thing, is like, we have to prepare your body. It's really about like preparing your mind, body, and like spirit. And I mean that in a not hokey way of just like, you have to be ready. Your system has to be ready. And it actually does start with those detox pathways, like I mentioned, that are in the freebie. Y'all can download at bit.ly/detox411. That like, that is actually where I start, folks, because if your detox pathways aren't open, if you're not pooping, if you're not sweating, if you're not drinking enough water and urinating often enough, and if you're not able to really exhale, we can't do anything else. Like that is step one. And that is something I see a lot of people make a huge mistake with when they work with other practitioners and go through other programs and processes. Like, y'all, that is a recipe for ultimately feeling like crap, weight gain, sleep issues, hormone imbalance, talk about skin stuff. Ugh. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, if anybody else has any other questions, otherwise Marissa has recorded this, and so we're going to post it on both of our pages. You can follow Marissa at Marisa Faye Wellness on Instagram, and she will have her program linked on there, as well as that free detox, which I'm actually going to do myself for next time.
I want to download it.
And then everybody that's following my page, I'm at Holistic Injector. And thank you all so much for joining us. And so much. I'm so excited to share all this information with all my clients.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much, Allie.
Thank you. And everybody that joined us, take care. Have a good rest of your day. All right. Bye.
Bye.